So there's a lot of ways, go na le tsela tse dintsi, how I wanted to start this podcast. And one of the reasons was I kept thinking about how, to introduce. But it's part of the theme of what I'm talking about, Kacheko. My name is Kelebohile, but you can call me Lebo. So, today, like the fear of rejection, you know? Even now, people don't realize Hore Gwababa, as we call it, is such a big driving factor mo maphelong a batho. So for now, I define Gwababa as something that stops you from pursuing what you really want. Because ya o nyenyefatsa, you know? Gwababa goes a little bit deeper. Like, I'm watching The Office. There's this character, ba re ke Michael, ke boso ya bona. This guy, he's afraid of women, Normally people associate Gwababa le being afraid of women. That's what people normally associate Gwababa with. But Gwababa goes a little bit deeper. Like, okay, let's talk about this, right? Let's say Obona Moto. And one thing, before I get into this, people don't realize is that Gwababa affects both Batubaba Sadi Levabanna. So many women are scared of initiating a relationship because they are so afraid of being rejected. Even Banna Babanchi, they're afraid, because they're afraid. People are afraid. Like a guy once said to me, Hori, he would rather fight someone than to say something momotung matlang. But so for me, that's what really defines Gwababa, right? The Gwababa stops you from pursuing what it is that you dream about most of the time. Like if you have a preference of the kind of partner that you want, and Gwababa is there, the fear of rejection is there in your life, you will constantly feel like anytime you meet anyone who is similar to anything that you will want, you will bona or tlotshoga, and most of the time you will not be able to address how you feel. But this is something that, like I said, it goes a little deeper because for me, Gwababa, Gwababa stops you from pursuing your dreams because if someone looks and talks like the definition of what you want in your life, but you're afraid to go for bona, then without realizing it, you're denying yourself the how. Like, okay, like I was saying, I'm watching The Office, but something people can relate to, the 40-year-old virgin. How does someone get to be 40 and a virgin? It's the fear of rejection. Because if this person spoke to women, they would someday meet someone to sleep with. I'm just saying. Or akatsamaya braga chiki tiger bras chiki tiger. So, but it is this fear of rejection that we have that I wanted to address today. The fear of rejection, let me talk about my fear of rejection was I had a deep fear of talking to women, but not only that, the idea of rejection is so painful to a human being. With me, it was born and bred when I was born, and both my parents were not in the picture, but they were present, they were alive, but they were not in the picture. without realizing it, I internalized this, you know, and this is where for me my rejection was born because, you know, my parents didn't mean not to be in my face and parent me because ababadly no circumstances tabuphelo, but in its own, you know, when my mother would constantly come back and my father was not present, there was a need for me to sort of like impress my father. But then I didn't realize I always wanted to impress my father so he stays around, you know. But this built something very deep in me that when I talk to people and I feel like they're not receiving me, and then I would end up very angry, you know, and that's where Shiman Babang then I went then I you know, all of those things. It comes from a place of rejection. And the thing about rejection is that it blinds you, right? It blinds you to what is really going on. You know, sometimes people have their own preferences and you have your own preferences. And this is the problem with rejection. So, ngwanyana o nyaka monna tshwereng dimilione. Nna ke bereka ko spa. Nna ke nyaka yena ka gore ke ngwanyana wa kwa ditoro. Ke a fihla ka mo fasa. Ha sa nyake fela ka kwata. Mara ha dumela fela ke ba le mathata mo bophelong because a ke khone mo sustaina. Ona le di preferences tsa hae. Wa bona? And you know, everyone has a preference. If motho rata tšhelete ke preference ya hae. The problem with people is that we re batla batho ba re rate le rena ka mokgwa re leng ka teng, re lebale le rena re ba ratile ka mokgwa nna re ba nyaka ka teng, e seng ka mokgwa bona ba leng ka teng. Nako nngwe batho ba bang a se ka fa ba leng ka teng, mara ke ka mokgwa rena re ba nyakang ka teng. Wa bona ne? So the problem ka rejection is that it thiba this thing ya motho o na le preference ya hae, or sometimes maybe motho is having a bad day. O tla kwa tla hamba mmoditse mma hae wa lwala ha ra mo fasa fela re a mapili wena, then wena a fotek wena. So you see, you are, because this person has a deep sense of rejection. It cuts deep. I still remember this one time a long time ago. I was with this girl and we were, you know, getting hard ready, and you know, and then she said to me, nah, you know, I don't feel like it. I think she was playing around, but I got so angry. And this is something that happens. In that moment, I got so angry because I didn't realize I felt rejected, right? Because this was a very sensitive moment, and that's why most men become so angry in that moment when they become, because he's very sensitive in that. He's very, you know, people never talk about it, but a man who has an erection, he's not really, you know, like if Munna, it doesn't matter who he is. If he's in a room and he has an erection and he's with a woman, and you walk in, you're like, get it now. He in I don't care what size you are, but he becomes very vulnerable. Waibona. So that's what sometimes happens. But for me, that's what was happening. But when I realized, oh my God, her telling me she doesn't want to make love tonight has nothing to do with me being angry that she says she can't today, has less to do with her but more to do with you know. So Gwababa can really redefine your life. Now, you can have Gwababa and still be successful, but this is why some people are very successful but they don't feel like they're living their lives, you know. Most men, they're very, and the problem with Gwababa is that, so if you become successful, some people, when they have Gwababa and they become successful, Gwababa turns into ego, right? Because when I didn't have anything, nobody treated me like this. So sometimes that's what you see with how most men will treat women because they feel like they were not granted, the opportunity to be with certain women until such a certain time where they can afford certain things. And yeah, but that same person who's very successful, Gwababa can turn into an ego. How does this happen? So, because I was so afraid to talk to you, now I have something that everybody wants. Kinali polo, kinali chalede. This doesn't set in right away. It sets in slowly, right? I'm driving in my car now. All the girls bantebella, and then babangiblen bampoletisa. Eh, then kitoma ho jwala a few girls. Then I realized something. Most of them they don't care. Sometimes people, when people don't care, it's not something that you can even see on the stuff. Some people, like people are not stupid. People are not stupid. Like treat someone without care. They know it's a spiritual, it's an emotional thing. People are not stupid, guys. Like, if otwara moto kariki cash cow ya Hawaii. Some people it's just that they are blinded. Okay. So rejection can come from normally with Gwababa. Gwababa comes from a deep place where you have felt rejection. Most people who come from a place with two parents, it's not often, but it does happen for them to also experience the fear of rejection, because this sometimes it's not just born from batswadi. There are so many things, ngwana o kgona ho ba teng ka mo ntlong, batswadi ba be teng, but bana batswadi skebe ba bona ngwana a lele attention ya batswadi, then they will grow up with this resentment. So it doesn't say because batswadi are there in the house, then the child will not have this weapon. So normally Gwababa comes from a place where we are deeply hurt by people we love, or we feel very deeply rejected by people we love. And Gwababa, getting rid of the fear, now I'm talking about the fear of rejection, but in other episodes we'll talk about different types of fears. But the fear of Gwababa can grant you peace, right? If you get rid of it, it will grant you peace. If you nurture it, it will turn into ego. Most of the people that have egos have rejection, but rejection doesn't mean some people are very loud. Some people are very loud. Mumponing also suffer from rejection, but how they internalize the rejection is not the same way as how the other person so there is different types of ways where people internalize what they're feeling. Some people feel rejection, and they on the outside they project something different. They project unity, but they're not really like that. There is that deep sense of and the fulfillment of not feeling that is maybe connecting people. And then there are people who they don't really feel like, some people, just because someone is quiet doesn't mean they have this fear of, no, some people they're just at peace. And this is where you get to dealing with Gwababa, your fear of rejection, whether it was born from parents or it was born from a lackluster of your siblings coming together around you, or it's born from the fact that you never felt like people appreciate you enough. Getting rid of it requires you to face it, right? And when you face it, it will take different shapes and forms. Now, how do we go about facing Gwababa. So one thing about Gwababa is that you have to think about those things. You have to now go back in your mind to a place where you have to ofodise wena. So if now lo munyane batswadi ba tsamaile, acknowledge or thinking se se nkutlwisitse botlhoko. If batswadi ba tlhokofetse lo munyane, that can also bring about rejection. Where when and you talk to yourself about you feel disabjang the fact that motho tsamaile ha ba le nako for wena, or maybe even not gore motho tsamaile motswadi tsamaile but batswadi ba tlhokofetse ke le monnye ha zanka ka ba le lerato lela ene ke a tshoha ho approacha batho, ke a tshoha ho ba le batho you know. So you for me it was I had to face it, right? So my Gwababa, I had to find avenues more Gwababa ya ka iphela mo teng, then I had to challenge it. The first avenue was the preference ya banyana ba nna ke banyakang. I had to now go for bona batho bao ke fihle ke bolle le bona, and then have that, because one thing about Gwababa is this, right? If you have a preference of people like this, when someone who is not your preference comes around, you find it very easy. Utlhokomela bashimane kgotsa bashimane, they find, or even women, right? But bashimane because that's where I can attest to. Bashimane find it very easy go fasa banyana ba iseng preference ya bona, mara o bona ba reng ke ngwanyana wa ditoro tsa bona, but they sweat. I want ba thake dipelo, ba thake Gwababa, ya fitla joetse nna even ka tshoa wela lwena. But there's another girl like a mona na taba wa bona ne. So this goes to say it's a mind, it's a matter of the mind, and where we place value, we are afraid of being rejected. The people we place most value in, we are afraid of them rejecting us. So what we do is that sometimes we find it easy to, that's why people are okay with being in the friend zone, and they're not saying, no, I don't want to be your friend, I want to be more. Or okay, if it's not me you prefer, it's fine. So dealing with Gwababa has to do with you facing. Sometimes it has to do with you thinking about memories. We know Gwababa is very different. You have to face it by taking it head on, right? If you have a preference of this kind of boy or girl, sometimes you talk to them. The end game is not for them horrible accept no, the end game is to get rejected. Look for rejection. Look for rejection. If you are afraid one day mo bophelong ba gago ka se reke koloi, then start o lebelele dikoloi tse tsotlhe tse wena o di nyakang, then o zamela diplane that will reject you. Because once you face rejection, o tlo bona hore ntho ke tshabang ke tshaba o phela ditoro tsa ka. Because ha o bona motho o monyaka ele motho wa ditoro tsa gago mara o palla ko bolela, then that says hore you're not living your dreams. O tshaba ho phela ditoro tsa gago. That is why motho can be successful mara a sa phele ditoro tsa hae, because they were driven by Gwababa. Ke tshaba ho ba doctor, rather give a teacher, it's a safe option. Why bona ditoro tsa rena so we need to look for rejection. If we are afraid of it, let's look for it and familiarize ourselves with it, and we will realize that rejection teaches us that everyone unale preference. Why bona if I speak to someone then it doesn't mean hore I'm akerategi. No, it just means motho la ona le sa se ratang ka batho ba ba so, and then I'm not that type of a person. Why bona a ke se yena motho la a se batlang. So rejection is not really based more reality, it's based more preferencing. Kore le wena gona banong like o itse nako nngwe re na lo lebala and re na lo nagana gore batho ba re rejecta because rena a re batlege mara gopola gore na le motho o mongwe le ena a ka tla mo wena ba utlwisetsa segafi ba re sa o rata o ka se senyake o na le preference a kere so re tlhoko re afforte batho ba bang preference kore re afforte batho bang kore ga batho ba re rejecta a se taba ya gore a ba re batle a ba go na le se bona ba se batlang wa bona it's not about us so ke a leboga if le ratile if you loved what we spoke about today please like and subscribe and please share it with your friends ke a leboga